Hi, good morning. We are
Hi.
live, just getting comfortable on my bed. That's where I hide for the chats. Um, we are live with the amazing Dr. Vanessa Moulton in the second day of mental awareness. So I've just run up the stairs as well, I'm out of breath. Mental health awareness week. And she is the fountain of all knowledge, well, an amazing psychologist, the founder of Mindflex. What else? Psychological fitness theory. I'm going to basically get you to talk more about all the different things, but also you've got an amazing background. It isn't a kind of, I've just become a psychologist and studied and I'm going straight into, you've got your military background, and the work you've done on that and your PhD on PTSD and everything in the vet world has kind of set you up to be slightly different and a very kind of all-round psychological fitness type, which I love, because that whole kind of mental health of you've got a problem, you need treatment, that kind of problem treatment kind of makes people think that there's something wrong with them, or to only look at it when there's something wrong with them rather than, I love your sort of thing is actually, if you look after your body and your diet and stuff, then why aren't you looking after your psychological fitness? So just explain sort of the way you operate.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and obviously we've known each other for a very long time now, so you know the journey that I have been through with this whole, with all the training that I did, and where I suppose where I fell into things. As you said, I've done a lot of work with the military and military mental health. Starting from my training and doing my big piece of research on PTSD and veterans. And then I worked in some amazing places, especially when the military, the British armed forces were going through a lot, going through, the war in Afghanistan. So I worked at the rehabilitation centre for the MOD during the thick of the Afghan conflict and at combat stress. And then at Help for Heroes for 5 years, heading up the psychological wellbeing service there. And I think it was a lot of what was happening there really kind of fueled my understanding of perhaps maybe where we were missing a bit of a trick, or maybe where I wasn't kind of sweating the opportunity as such at Help for Heroes in terms of what we could do for all of the veterans and the serving folk that were coming through all the recovery centres. Because like what we have all done over the last 10, 15 years is focus just on how we treat mental ill health and making sure that we've got more services available. We try and reduce the stigma for people so that people want to come forward more when they are struggling. What we haven't historically been doing is helping people understand that we don't just wait until we are struggling to then start paying attention to our psychological health. So it's Help for Heroes, and I suppose I put a lot of my experience or a lot of where I am now down to what I've learned along the way. And it was, as I say, at Help for Heroes where I thought, do you know what, we've got the opportunity here to teach people as much as possible that they should be looking after their psychological health, be preventative, be proactive around their psychological health, so that you don't end up then struggling with your psychological health. And you talked about it, and you're fully into the whole kind of physical fitness. I do as much as I can with you. And it is exactly that. We've got to start paying more attention to how we keep psychologically fit as much as we do keeping physically fit. So I suppose it was kind of off the back of that that I ended up doing and writing the content for a mental fitness platform for the MOD. But then with Mindflex, my business, have created what I call a psychological fitness series. And I just do as much as possible with organisations, but also within the treatment that I do and the one-to-one work that I do, to try and help people firstly understand the science of their mind, so that they can have a little bit more ownership around how they help themselves, but then more importantly, just have a slightly different attitude towards your psychological health. Like, think about it as something that isn't something you only think about if you are struggling. So work on it daily. You've got to. We have to now, because the stats for mental ill health continue to rise despite the amount of work and campaigns and services that are now available. Some things are missed here if it's still increasing. And so we have to, all of us, doesn't matter what age you are, what role you have in an organization. We've all got to try to keep psychologically fit. And I think the last year has probably brought that to the fore for a lot of people more than anything.
Yeah, on the do you think a lot of that being missed is because you think, I mean, I know you think you're fine, and you know what I mean, you're kind of bad, and it's people don't really know what the signs are, as in to read that you're not all right. You know, it's one of those things that you're so busy, and everyone's so busy in their lives, going 3,000 miles per hour, and so much on it. Sort of something you don't really think about, and you don't what. So just sort of what are kind of the sort of very common signs that you're going down, you know what I mean, that you know, the mind, you know, the start of depression or the start of anxiety, or the things to sort of look out for. But yeah, I mean, obviously you have to do things daily, but there might be people watching that kind of have just kept squashing.
Yeah,
I don't think it is,
and that's reality. I always say this, you know, we are, as human beings, we're a little bit like a pressure cooker, and you know, a pressure cooker works and doesn't explode by gently letting off steam as it goes along. You know, you don't just leave it right to the end to let the steam off. And that's exactly what we're like. And when we try and squish stuff down and box stuff off, or just keep ploughing on, in the end, those emotions will come out somehow. And usually they come out in a very unhelpful time or in a very unhelpful way. So yeah, it's so important to understand that. I mean, it's really interesting, just something that's just popped into my mind when you were saying that. It's something that I deal with loads, and this is quite specific to anxiety. A really interesting sign that we need to start paying attention to what's going on. A lot of people that I work with that are struggling with anxiety report a lot that their memory is going. I think there's something wrong with me. I can't remember anything. Things just seem to be slipping my mind the whole time at the moment. Is there something wrong with my memory is going? And the reason behind that, and this is why I always promote understanding the science behind your mind. When you start becoming more and more anxious, you are basically more anxious when you're, which one's that? You become more anxious because basically you're up here more in your life. You're in your head, you're in your thoughts way more than you are just living your life in the here and now. And when we are up here just in our thoughts and we're not kind of present with what we're doing, we're not paying attention actually to the things that we are doing. So it feels like we're losing our minds and where our memory's going, but actually all it is because you're not actually paying attention in the here and now with a lot of stuff that's going on. You're actually just paying attention to the thoughts that are whirring around in your head constantly. So actually, if you feel like you're forgetting things a lot, or you feel like your memory's struggling, that is a really important sign that a lot of people over the last year have been reporting more and more to me with the increased amount of anxiety. Also with anxiety, I mean, it's something that a lot of people feel very physically. So always pay attention to what's going on in your body. If your chest is feeling tighter, if you recognize that you start feeling a bit tingly sometimes in your hands, again, usually when we're stressed and anxious, we breathe with much shorter breaths, for example. And actually, it's actually a form of kind of hyperventilation, because we're not breathing slowly and through our belly. So you can see the physical manifestations. And actually, there's lots of physical manifestations like tension headaches, kind of aches and pains in your body. Those are the sort of things we also look out for. Lots of different ones. But in terms of depression as well, a lot of that focuses, or signs and symptoms focus around us starting to kind of disengage with the things that we usually really enjoy, or we really struggle to laugh at or enjoy the things that we would normally enjoy. We disengage with people because a lot of times when we feel really low, we don't want people to see us that way. So what we do is we back off and we retreat, which is actually the worst thing that we can do, because we know that the biggest psychological protective factor is our social network, which is why, again, this last year it's hard for people, because yes, we've had this ability, look what we're doing now, connecting with people, But that social support network, the things that happen when you're in person with someone, you know, the non-verbal cues that you can pick up on someone.
It's that energy, isn't it? I've been saying, I've seen, like, had so many chats, but now I'm back in rooms with actual people. It's what it's done to my head is a different. It's totally different.
Yeah, you can't have the same connection with someone. You can't pick up on the non-verbal cues that you get from someone when you are in person with them. And then also the very basics of touch. We know that touch stimulates the serotonin and the happy hormones. We haven't had the ability to do that. So, you know, the last year, that's why, I mean, there's so many things that have contributed towards a lot of the struggle that a lot of people have had with their psychological health over the last year. I mean, in the last year, I have never had so many people come forward for support for their psychological health before. It's been the busiest year that I've known as a psychologist.
Which says what a bad year it's been.
Yeah, and unfortunately what we also know in my world is that we haven't seen the peak of it yet when it comes to psychological health. When these sorts of things happen, these sorts of pandemics, although this one's very difficult to compare, but when we look at other pandemics, what we do know is once the physical support drops off, we know that we're going to end up with more people. In fact, it went a bit, when I say it went a bit quiet, the last month I haven't had as many people come forward, and literally in the last week I've had about 10 people contact me for therapy support. So I think that we'll really kind of continue to see this fluctuation. And the reality is that's life, that's our psychological health. It does fluctuate. And I think, again, going back to psychological fitness is what, you know, some of the things where we go wrong is when we start dipping, we start to think that there's something really wrong. But actually, you know what, we really naturally peak and trough with our psychological health. The trick is when you start to go down a bit and trough a bit, you've got to dial up all the things that you know contribute positively towards your psychological health, so you don't keep going down. You can pull yourself back up, and that's what psychological fitness is at the end of the day, is being able to acknowledge those peaks and those troughs, and just having the tools and the strategies and the understanding around why you might be feeling the way that you're feeling. That's what I, you know, really focus on. It's a really core foundation of any training and workshops and my psychological fitness series that I do, is helping people understand the science of their brain. It's a complicated machine, but actually I can drill it down to some really simple stuff that helps people make sense of why they're feeling like they're feeling. And for me, the bit why that's really important, and it's something as a therapist, you know, I do therapy as well as the other stuff. In therapy, it's always been, for me, I've kind of really felt that unfairness, that the people that come to therapy are the people that get to really understand how the mind works. It's not something we've historically taught in schools or we've focused on. Actually, brilliantly, they are starting to do that now. They really are. But actually, our generation, and for, you know, pretty much anyone who's not in school now, they won't have the luxury generally of knowing how your emotional systems work, or what part of your brain is kicking in now when you're feeling anxious and stressed. And that's really important to that general psychological health and psychological fitness of everyone.
And how would you like, how, because it's like starting out like a fitness, I mean, someone, you know, that's that whole couch to 5k thing that people do, you know, and there's a kind of a process, and for fitness there's quite, you know, it's quite an easy way, you know, to find out and look at how do you go from the couch to being able to run 5k and do daily little steps. What's your advice on sort of doing the daily kind of psychological fitness, and just building up? And because people who have never done it before will go, well, where do I start? You know, we've heard about mindfulness, we've heard about this, we've heard about that, and you know what I mean, there's so much sort of, you know, buzzwords out there being thrown at us at the moment. What's your advice on that?
Well, I mean, obviously I have my psychological fitness series, which, you know, at the end of the day, that's what that does, because, you know, my belief, and this comes from the experience that I've had, both from doing therapy and all the psychological fitness stuff that I've done in the past. What we have been quite good at, and what you've kind of said, lots of buzzwords, is a lot of people have been thrown loads of like mindfulness strategies, breathing strategies, just they're kind of disparate stuff that just, yeah, absolutely. We know that they're going to be good for people, but that's the kind of the how you do it. The first step actually is the why. Why would you do all of this? You know, why do I need to do this? And why, if I do a breathing technique, is that actually going to help me? So the why for me is the science. I love science. I know you're the same. You're a fact-based person. I'm a pretty fact-based person. And I think for me, that was reinforced with all the work that I've done with the military guys and girls, is that, yeah, this is a topic in the past that has potentially been seen as a bit fluffy and, you know, just kind of wishy-washy. So I think that's why, for me, I've always been so keen on keeping the science, the real kind of focus around this. Everything's backed up by the way that your brain is made, it's designed, it's got some big design faults in it that means it doesn't help us a lot on a day-to-day basis. So the first step really is to understand the very basics, the foundations of psychological fitness, which is all embedded into the science of the mind. There's some, you know, some simple stuff that you can kind of find online, but that's what I've tried to do in my psychological fitness series. It's just an hour-long immersion session that gives you everything that you need to know in terms of the science of the mind. And then it's just about understanding the different kind of factors in your life where you can use skills and strategies to boost your psychological fitness. So I've kind of created a little psychological fitness model that's kind of got 10 psychological fitness factors, all evidence-based, that we know if you just do 5 minutes tools or strategies a day, if you do them, we know, research shows us that they will contribute positively towards your psychological health. So knowing how to unwind and de-stress, for example, it is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Your brain has to decompress. You know, your brain does so much for you on a day-to-day basis. And if you don't give it rest, just like you can't go to the gym 7 days a week, I know that some people probably do, but the reality is your body will become fatigued, and your brain is exactly the same. And, you know, and if we don't, this is what ends up with burnout at the end of the day, because your brain can't be expected to function, and it can't be expected to be online, and even more so in threat mode, for longer than it's designed to be. So there's a load of tools and strategies. So another psychological fitness factor is compassion. I just did a workshop yesterday for an organization on that. You know, compassion is a majorly important psychological fitness factor. That's being compassionate and kind towards others, which we're much better at. What we're not very good at is being kind and compassionate to ourselves. So just, you know, I've got 10 of these factors, and actually by understanding why they're important and then the tools and strategies that fit underneath all of them, what it means is, you know, there's a lot of things that you can do. It's not just about breathing. It's not just about mindfulness. It's not just about specific things. There's loads of different tools and strategies that you can use. But my advice is always understand the why first, because there is a much greater chance you will keep with the psychological fitness habits if you understand the why. I run a habit workshop, which helps people understand the very basics of forming a habit, because a lot of us can just go out the starting blocks and kind of go, right, I'm going to do this. But usually the best thing to do is just to make small incremental little changes. You've got a much greater chance of keeping them embedded into your life one at a time. So, you know, one of my favorite tools, for example, is actually a breathing tool. It's the 7-11 breathing tool. You know, it's the first thing I do when I get up in the morning. I kind of anchor that to something that I do every single day to make sure it becomes a habit. Doing 7-11 breathing helps calm my nervous system down at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, and it's something that I can do.
What is that? Just explain what I know what it is, but I know everything. What that 7-11, I don't at all. I just need to practice it more. Explain what it is. Yeah.
Well, 7-11 breathing has got nothing to do with the shop, but it's basically quite simply when we breathe in for 7 and out for 11. The numbers don't actually matter, but what we're trying to achieve here is that your out breath is just longer than your in breath. Now, the science behind that, because there's always science behind it, is when we breathe in, we stimulate the part of the nervous system that that ramps everything up. It's our threat system. And that's because when we breathe in, it lifts the diaphragm up. When we breathe out, we stimulate the part of the nervous system that calms everything down. So if you do 2 minutes of 7-11 breathing, or whatever your count is, but with a longer out breath count than your in breath, you will physiologically make changes in your body, and it will calm your threat system down. It will calm your nervous system down. So it's such an easy, you can do it anywhere. It doesn't have to be over exaggerated breathing. You can do it sitting in a meeting. If you're starting to feel stressed, you can do it when you're not feeling stressed, just to be proactive, to help prevent the stress levels building up during the day. So a really lovely little kind of breathing technique, which again, embedded in science, because you are physiologically changing stuff in your body if you adopt this sort of breathing. But genuinely, 2 minutes of that, and it will calm you down.
And on the little things, as you said, the breaking habits. Often, people are very good at starting, aren't they? Or they start and they join a gym and they're like in there 4 days in a row and then nothing, because they've done 2 hours a day on those 4 days and can no longer walk anymore. It's the same. What's your advice on like sort of keeping going and not breaking the habits, not breaking, not going sort of all balls in, so to speak, and doing and then suddenly sort of 2 weeks later it's like, well, it's all gone out the window and it's a bit rubbish, and don't need it, because that's the thing as well, isn't it? I'm fine, I don't need it.
That last point is so important, and it's one of the reasons why I might have people come back for therapy, for example, if they've done really well and that we've had sessions and they feel good, is because they don't keep stuff up. I'm not doing that anymore because I felt okay. Well, no, you felt okay because you were doing all that stuff. So it's about maintenance, and that again is what psychological fitness is maintaining our psychological health well by doing this stuff. But you're right, in terms of keeping habits going, there's some really important things, and I know it sounds a bit long-winded, and it's not, and I cover this in my habits workshop, is that actually planning what you how you're going to planning the new habit is just as important as trying to do it. So there's a couple of really key things that you can do that will give you a better chance that you'll keep the habit up. So for example, plan for failure is one of the important things. Is that, say for example, you want to start running every morning, and what can you do when you get up or your alarm's not gone off in the morning, you haven't got up? Plan how you would respond. Is there a different point in the day where you can do it? Get your running kit out the night before, for example. So imagine the things that could trip you up and just have a bit of a solution ahead of time. The two things that we know that are really important for keeping a habit up is, and the research shows us, the most important thing for keeping a habit up is that it needs to be fun. Now, I appreciate that not everything's going to be fun, but you've got to try and find a fun element to any new habit that you do, because that will give you a greater chance of keeping it up. And also motivators. So yes, we could go, yes, I'm really motivated to get fit, but actually getting really fit takes a while. So you don't get that reward for a while. So actually small interim rewards, you have to reward yourself. Your brain works. We have an emotional system, the drive system that needs to be activated, and we have to reward ourselves to keep habits up. Just really important aspects about a habit. Those are the important things. Make it motivational by rewarding yourself, not just with the end goal, and make sure that you somehow make that new habit, there's an element of fun to it. And there's lots of different creative ways you can do that. In terms of breaking a cycle or breaking a habit, one of the most important things that you have to do before you start understanding or start trying to break a habit is to get your head out of autopilot, which is one of the things that our brain does for the majority of our day. We spend 80% of our time in autopilot, which basically means we're not paying attention to most of the things that we're doing. So you have to get your brain, you have to kickstart that conscious part of our brain to focus on what it is about that habit. What are the things that that habit is anchored into? Is it associated with something that's in your day, so that you can kind of red flag it? Like if once it gets to 12 o'clock, you always kind of reach for the biscuit tin, for example. What can you put into it if you know that that's kind of like a red flag time for you? What can you put in your diary that takes you away from your desk? Go for a walk, for example. So getting out of autopilot to really understand what that habit that you want to break is associated with is a really important aspect. And then you've got to just really focus on the motivators around what you will get out of not doing that habit anymore. What are the things that are actually important to you? Why is it relevant to you? Personalize it. Why is it really important to you that you want to stop doing that habit? And again, importantly, in comes reward. You have to reward yourself for not doing that habit, hopefully with a healthier type of reward. And I don't mean, when I say healthy, I mean, either physically or mentally healthy. So those are just a couple of the things. I mean, I could go on, but I can see the time already. So
Right.
a couple of bits that are important around habit forming and habit breaking.
And on just finally, because of the theme for the week is connect with nature, and people, I've seen it on the news and seeing, everyone's go get out there and walk. But is on that, is it at that? Is it as simple as that? Is connect? When people go, well, what am I meant to do? Connect with nature? Do I go and hug a tree? Do I go and pee in a bush? Do I, what I mean? What's your advice on actually doing the getting out with nature and doing it properly for the best sort of headspace?
I mean, peeing in the bush
that's connecting with nature. So it just came into my head.
Definitely connecting with nature. The most, I think it's a really important point, and actually I'm doing some stuff this week which is exactly that, just trying to put some tips on, which is, yes, it is about going for a walk. Yes, it is about being in a green space, and there's lots of different ways to interpret that. But the most important thing when you're there is, and the word that's important here is connect. Because it's very easy to go for a walk in nature and still be tapping away at your phone.
That's my walk daily.
Yeah. Right, today, go for a non-phone, non-tech walk. Because and that's the problem. Where we know that we can get the most benefit out of being in nature is if we allow all of our senses to actually experience it, and that is what you hear, what you can see, what you can smell, what you can touch, or that's what is the really important part. That's the connection part, because it's so easy to kind of, like I say, go to the park but be head down looking at the phone. We know there's some really fascinating facts about nature, and you'll love this. Nature has what we call fractal patterns, and the objects in nature have this very unique pattern. They call them fractal patterns, which are really soothing and calming for our brain. So it's about paying a bit more attention, but it's getting sometimes, again, just being a bit closer. I know it sounds a bit weird, but picking up a leaf and just really having a look at it. It's very easy to just be there, but it's also very easy to not actually be there. And that is it, and it's not about having to do a mindfulness thing, because actually that is the concept of being mindful. You don't have to go and do a mindful guided thing when you're walking through it, but just simply kind of go, what can I hear, what can I see, what can I smell, what can I touch?
Present, isn't it?
As simple as that. Just to be a little bit more present in it will enable you to have or get the most out of it. I've been out this morning. Actually, I went to the woods this morning, and there was no
Did you pee
one
in a
there.
bush? Did you pee in a bush? You did, didn't you?
I didn't actually. No.
Okay.
And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. Yeah, the very basics of just, there was no one there, and the birds were deafening this morning, and I just thought, oh, that's so cool. But I will do it. I will, or even when we go for a run, and it's great to exercise, and we know that exercising in green spaces has an even better effect. But take the headphones out. I know we like to use music to keep us motivated, but actually, you know what? Just if you're running through the streets, and then you get into a nice wood or green place, take the headphones out, or maybe just walk that bit, so that you can slow down and just be there.
Sorry, my dog is going crazy. But I find the outside bit as well. And when you look up, to me, it gives me perspective that I'm just a tiny, tiny little part of a much bigger that. And so you just, if you're really consumed by an issue or something going on, and when I take myself out and look up and just walk, and you just realize how irrelevant you are in the grand scheme of things in the world. And so the problems just go.
Exactly. And actually, there's two ways. You can look up and kind of like get that bigger picture, but also when you hone in, the teeny tiny things that are going on in nature are amazing. I'm a big scuba diver, and I love diving places where I can see nice big fish and big things. But actually, one of the most beautiful dives I've ever done in my life was years ago, and I remember it so well. It was in Egypt, and it was a really shallow dive, and there was nothing big, but the coral was teeming in teeny tiny little fish. And it was I could have just floated there and just watched this whole thing going on in front of me for hours. And so sometimes it's about the bigger stuff, but then also the small stuff, again, gives you perspective of this other kind of world that's going on around you.
Amazing. Well, do you know what? And we'll end on that point. And it's in with connect with nature theme, and it's the only thing a lot of people can do at the moment, isn't it? Get out there and walk and
make the most of it. But just get this, throw it away. Not throw it away.
I wish I could.
That's the best way. Otherwise we can't help ourselves.
But we'll add it's mindflexlab.com. Anyway, we'll put all the info of where you can find Nessa's sort of psychological fitness like steps and workshops. Or you can hound her and stalk her on social media. Thanks, Ness. That was